Good evening and welcome to a very special interview show of the Prode. Today marks a major milestone for us as we celebrate 5 years of continued thought leadership on global affairs. Over these years, we have focused deeply on foreign policy, economic policy, defense policy, the environment, and global health. As we step into the next chapter, we are proud to share that our conversations will now expand further, bringing in more issues, especially those that profoundly shape our future. At the Prode, we believe that thought leadership must be inclusive, amplifying diverse voices across generations, backgrounds, and identities. And tonight's conversation reflects that commitment. We are glad to be joined by Raye Parker, a young and passionate trans rights activist who will share their insights on a very important and timely topic, the recent UK Supreme Court ruling that defines women strictly based on biological sex. The decision followed a challenge to the Scottish government's move to include trans women in gender balance quotas on public sector boards. The judges ruled that under the Equality Act 2010, sex is binary and determined by biology, meaning legal protections specifically for women apply only to those who are born female. While the act still protects trans people against discrimination to some level, this ruling has sparked serious debate about its wider impact on the lives and rights of trans women. Together, we'll explore what this decision means personally and legally for trans women in the UK, its broader societal impact, how activists and allies can respond, and what the future of trans rights might look like. We'll also hear Ray's personal message to the wider community, a reminder that true inclusivity is more than just about law, it's about recognizing people's dignity, experiences, and humanity. Thank you so much, Ray, for your time and a very warm welcome to the show.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
I would like to begin the discussion by asking that how do you personally interpret the Supreme Court's decision to define women strictly based on biological sex, and what deeper message do you believe it sends about inclusion and rights in today's society?
Um, Personally, I feel very disappointed at the ruling, very sad and kind of anxious of what it holds for the future for trans people in the UK. I think it sets quite a dangerous precedent and a worrying precedent for trans people and for queer people in general and any marginalized community, really. Um, yeah,
Beyond the legal framework, what tangible impact do you foresee this ruling have on the daily lives, safety, and dignity of trans women in the UK, particularly regarding access to single-sex spaces?
I see it having a very harmful impact. Um, and we're seeing that already with the Equality Human Rights Commission guidelines that have been released, stating that trans people shouldn't be going into the single sex spaces of their preferred gender, but also in some circumstances, they shouldn't be going into that of their biological sex either, which um, creates a very dangerous situation where trans people will not be able to go anywhere really and feel safe in that space. Um, I think it'll have a huge impact on the daily lives of trans people, especially as they are already a group in society that um, they are already at a higher risk of hate crimes, sexual assault, and especially like mental health issues. Um, so trans people are going to feel far more anxious in society. They're going to fear hate crime. They're going to fear being outed. And it's just going to lower the quality of life significantly, I think.
Yeah, in your view, how might this decision shape or shift broader societal attitudes towards trans community over time? Are there potential long-term cultural consequences we should be thinking about?
Definitely, yeah. Not only does this ruling create um, worry, fear, anxiety, danger for trans people, but it sets a worrying boundary between male and female and presentation of gender that I think everybody should be worried about. Um, Not only has it given transphobes power and influence in government that, I mean, they shouldn't be having, um, it creates blatant fear mongering and it puts so many people in danger. Not only will trans people be in danger, but any cis person who doesn't adhere to the social expectations of their gender could also be in danger. Um, a cis woman who has short hair and likes to wear suits instead of dresses, for example, could instantly be questioned as being trans and have to and be forced to prove her biological sex, um, which is really, really worrying and something that I don't think people really think about necessarily when they want to protect women. Um, they are not protecting women; they're doing the opposite, if anything. Yeah, and also the same goes for cis males who like to be more feminine. It could put in danger gay men, drag queens, pretty much anyone who doesn't who doesn't who isn't who doesn't align with the social expectations that come with their gender, essentially.
Yeah, so the judges maintain that trans individuals remains protected from discrimination under the Equality Act. So, from a lived experience and policy perspective, do you believe that those protections are sufficient, or there is a gap between law and reality?
I don't think the Equality Act is sufficient. There is definitely, like you said, a gap between legal and reality. Um, the ruling saying that biological sex, a woman is specifically based on biological sex, sets a really dangerous precedent that people's rights, not just trans people's, but people's rights in the UK are fragile. They can be taken away easily. Um, Things can change very, very quickly. And like I said, we're already seeing that with the EHRC guidelines, but also the British Transport Police have already decided that strip searches on a trans woman, for example, will be conducted by a male officer, which is incredibly worrying when you look at the rates of sexual assault against trans women in particular. Um, so, no, I don't think this is enough legal protection at all, um, especially when we have the privilege of being able to see what is occurring in other countries, such as the USA. We have seen how quickly something like this can then spiral into something much more dangerous and worrying, um, to the point where, well, trans children already have no access to healthcare in the UK, and that is only going to get worse, essentially, especially with this ruling. Um, Oh, and also, I feel like I should mention that the ruling, um, this ruling undermines the Gender Recognition Act, which has been in place since 2004, in which a trans person can change their birth certificate so it's legally the correct gender, they're the one they identify most strongly with. And that means they've a trans woman who has a gender recognition certificate has all the legal protection that a cis woman does. And this ruling now completely undermines that, meaning the Equality Act is then kind of also undermined. And I think it just creates further confusion, um, and brings up more questions than it does answers, just to fearmonger trans people, essentially.
Yeah, so now coming to the challenges that this ruling presents, what strategic role do you see for activists, allies, and institutions, as well as journalists in responding, not just with resistance, but with renewed momentum for meaningful change?
Um, well, like you said, I think we definitely need to have renewed resistance, but it needs to be vocal and it needs to be like obvious. Attending protests is great, signing petitions, all of that. But I also think we need to focus on the community aspect too. So let's think of an if you own a small business, for example, put a trans flag in your window, make it clear that trans people are welcome in society. Um, because I think this ruling by by limiting where trans people are able to go in society in public, the bathrooms that they're able to use, the single sex spaces they're able to use, but also with the EHRC stating that in certain circumstances they're not able to use that of their biological sex as well. They're essentially creating spaces where trans people just aren't safe in public at all. So I think by having a community focus in our response, and really emphasizing that like between minority groups, between everybody involved, we are all there for each other and to support each other. Um, I think that's how we can have the most impact because this is going to have a big impact on trans people's mental health and community support in society is massively important. It should not be, um, yeah, it shouldn't be underestimated. That's the word I was looking for.
Yeah.
And also, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, no, please.
I just wanted to say that also because something is written in law, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's like the morally right thing to do. Um, like if it was written completely in law that somebody of biological sex male is never allowed in a female only space, that doesn't necessarily mean it's correct to limit trans women's access to that space because they are women and they deserve protection, the same protection that women get. So I think that's also something to be thinking about while we fight against that transphobia, to remember that our government doesn't define our morals and like, yeah, just that we should be here for each other and support that community for each other as well, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so you talked about trans people's mental health. So, from
Mhm.
your personal experiences as an activist, with whatever accounts you might have heard, what do you have to say on it? And how does this ruling, as well as in general, trans people are affected in terms of their mental health here in the UK?
Um, well, I don't know what else to say other than it's very bad at the moment, especially with um, the recent, well, fairly recent changes to trans healthcare for children. We know that teenagers are already going through loads of mental health crises with schooling, stress of A levels, everything occurring when you are a teenager. And I think limiting trans healthcare and support for trans children has a huge, huge impact on their mental health. And trans people in general have significant mental health struggles because of things like this, because of how we are often viewed by society, um, by the fear mongering of transphobes and the media claiming that we're a danger to women, that we are a danger to children. When so many trans people already struggle with mental health without all of that transphobia, because things like gender dysphoria and like the way we are viewed just for being trans or the struggle with our own identity and coming to terms with our identity is already so difficult and anxiety inducing um, in a world that pretty much focuses only on male and female. Um, I think gender dysphoria is already hugely distressing, and then adding transphobia such as this from society on top of the struggles trans people are already going through is honestly heartbreaking when they're such a vulnerable minority group and also such a small minority group um, who just want to live comfortably as themselves or as ourselves, you know?
Yeah. So, looking to the future, what kind of legal reforms, societal shifts, or policy innovations would you like to see in order to advance the rights, safety, and recognition of trans people in the UK? And how do you how do you analyze the current UK Labour government in terms of their efforts towards this community? Do you think they have done enough, or there is a huge gap between the impact and thought leadership?
No, I don't think the government have done enough or are doing enough, and nor do I really think they're going to do enough. With our prime minister already changing his mind from what he said a few years ago, and being incredibly fickle with his support for trans people and the queer community. Um, in an ideal world, we would definitely have more legal protection. So, firstly, I think we should recognize that there are more than two genders, because legally, as a non binary person, I cannot be recognized as anything but male or female at the moment, and have no protections because of that. Um, So I think that would be a great first step. I also think there should be more legal protection for trans people who want to medically transition specifically. We've seen the limits being put on children transitioning, and there is now a report being done onto adult transitioning services, which is incredibly worrying if they find similar things to the children's services. Um, and also, I think there should be more legal what's the word? Sorry. Um, legal decisions, let's say that for now, around the disregarding of the CAS review and the impact that that is going to have on trans people and their medical transitions specifically. For anybody who doesn't know, the CAS review was a review into the children's trans services, which essentially recommended that it be put off for anybody under 25, which calls into practice many, many worrying things about other healthcare issues um, and consent issues. So I think that would be important, saying anybody over 18 has a right to consent to their own medical treatment regarding whatever they wanted. Because currently there is a contradiction occurring, which I think needs to be addressed ASAP. Um, yeah, I think they would be the priorities, but also ideally a U-turn on this current decision, saying that trans women are women, full stop, trans men are men, full stop. Um, and then, of course, that non-binary people exist. Yeah, but
So,
that's not going to happen right now. So,
finally, as a young voice in this movement, what message would you like to share with the wider community, particularly about hope, resilience, and the path forward?
um, I suppose I could have a lot to say here, really. But I think one of my main messages would be that there has never been a world without queer and trans people in it. And there never will be, no matter what they're trying to do or trying to say. Um, we have always existed. There is proof of that, and also it's obvious, and we will always exist. Um, and also, I think that in times like this, there are many ways that we can show solidarity for each other, and also many ways that we can resist transphobia and things that are happening. So, in certain circumstances, like at pride parades in the middle of London, it is to be happy in that moment is a form of resistance. It is proving that you can be trans in a world that is not meant for you, and you can be happy, and at the same time, you can be angry. Um, and I think I want people to, especially trans people, to let themselves be sad and disappointed and angry, but also every trans person out there is amazing. So just for still existing. And I think they should also be really, really proud of themselves for that because it's not easy at the moment. Yeah, I think they're the main things I'd like to say.
Thank you so much, Ray, for sharing your experiences, insights, and most importantly, your vision for a more inclusive future. Today's conversation reminds us that true thought leadership is not just about analyzing the law or policy, but about centering the real lives, hopes, and challenges of those most affected. We look forward to continuing to bring you conversations that challenge, inspire, and ultimately shape a better world for everyone. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you.